A young engineer named Ed Hedrick is teaming with Jenkins in the super stock ranks. He'll drive a Chevy 2, while the boss will handle a Camaro. Ed Hedrick, what is it like to drive for a man like Bill Jenkins?
Well, I guess first of all, it's very tough because Bill is very exacting and very demanding. He's what I guess is called a perfectionist. Bill has treated us very well. He's been very lenient with a lot of my mistakes in driving, and we're very happy to drive for him. And at least as far as I'm concerned, I think it was a real big opportunity for me.
Welcome back, guys. My name is Parker with Backyard Barn Finds, and today we have a very, very special guest. His name is Ed Hedrick, and Ed is known for winning the only national title in a 1969 Yenko Camaro in 1970, as well as he drove the winningest Cobra in drag racing history, and also drove for Jenkins competition for a few years. Ed, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good to see you.
What I figured we'd do here is I have a bunch of notes, and I kind of just wanted to go over kind of like your history of just your life and kind of just put that out there for the audience to see. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is kind of like your early life. What was that like for you as far as drag racing goes? When did you first get the bug or the itch, or how did that start?
Well, I was always interested in mechanical things. I do have a kind of a vague memory of taking apart our power lawnmower and not being able to get it back together when I was young.
Okay.
But then I went to NC State, and I had a 39 Ford two-door sedan. That's what I drove to school. And along about my junior year, my dad got me a 55 Olds two-door sedan with a 3-speed.
And did you drag race that at all when you were in college or anything, or how did?
Yes, after I got the 55 Olds,
Okay.
then we used that to tow the 39 Ford and
cool.
tow it to the drag races, and ran several races at Sanford, and as I said, and a few races at Piedmont, the old Piedmont drag strip. And then after I graduated and moved up to Western New York, I didn't take the Ford with me. I had always been interested in cars and mechanical things, and it just seemed like the natural progression was me going to NC State and majoring in mechanical engineering.
Now, did you kind of tear cars apart and put them back together? Was that kind of what got you like interested in mechanical things when you were a kid, or? Well,
yes, in a way. My first car was a 1931 Pontiac two-door sedan, and so I did like work on that. In fact, it was I guess now it's a pretty rare car. It was a twin-headed 6, and the distributor sat right in the middle of the motor, and it had 2 separate cylinder heads, and it had a blown head gasket when I got it. And
what'd you pay for it?
$25. Actually, a real good family friend of ours had this finance used car business.
Okay.
And he called me up one day and said, I want you to come down, I have something I want to show you. And so he had taken that Pontiac in on a trade, and I went down to look at it, and he said, well, would you give $25 for it? And I said, oh, yeah. And he just gave it to me. So it had the blown head gasket, and you think, oh, I can fix it. Well, I had to go out. You couldn't buy a head gasket, so I had to go out to a junkyard and find another 31 Pontiac, pull the head off, and get a used head gasket to put in my car. But it didn't help it at all.
So there wasn't like parts readily available for that kind of stuff?
No. But it didn't help it any. It didn't seem like it made any more power at all, the fact that I replaced the head gasket. But I did a lot of working on that car and when I was still in high school.
So you graduated from NC State, and then you moved to Wellsville, New York.
Correct.
I do have that you raced in 61 at a local airport up there.
Right, Dunkirk.
Dunkirk. Oh wow, okay, that's the name. What car were you racing in 61? Was that with friends, or how did can you tell me a little bit about that experience? Or
well, I had traded, or actually sold my 55 Olds. No, I did. I traded the 55 Olds sedan to a guy that had a 59 Pontiac convertible.
okay.
with the 318 engine with an automatic, and so I traded that. And then I drove that for about a year, and then Pontiac came out in '60 with the 348 horsepower, 389. So I traded the convertible in and got a Ventura, which was like a Catalina with a little nicer interior in it. And with the 348 horsepower, 389, and with a 3-speed column on the column, because I couldn't afford to get the 4-speed. And I couldn't afford to get the nice aluminum hubs, wheels that you had in '60, '61, and '60.
Is that the one with the 8 lugs or
Yeah,
whatever?
with the 8 lugs,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't afford those either. But so I had the Pontiac, and that was for the day, it was a fast street car. And so I was drag racing that, and I converted the 3-speed on the column to put a floor shift in it. So I raced that at Dunkirk for all of 1960.
Were those like sanctioned races, or were those just kind of like a couple
it's
friends meeting at
just-
an airport, kind of going down the
No,
strip?
there was,
or?
it was, I really don't remember if there was an organization or it was just a promoter
A promoter.
or
Okay.
somebody organizing the thing at Dunkirk. It was an airport, old airport.
I heard it was a
but it was-
World War II
It
airport.
was a World War II airport, Air Force thing, I think. And it was just like a lot of local guys from Buffalo and areas that came there and raced. Most guys had Chevrolets, obviously.
Were you competitive?
Oh yeah, I could beat in '60. What they had was the 348 cubic inch motor with I think 315 horsepower with the 3.2s, and so there was actually some guys from Wellsville that had one of those that we used to, and I was always beating them, and they were always not happy with me. And
The out of town kid.
they were not happy with me beating them all the time. And
Any big names that you raced in '60, '61, or that anyone
well,
would know?
no. But in '60, at the end of the year, and during that year, I got to know Jack Strader, Robert Ashley, Jack Strader from Burlington, North Carolina, that ran a Pontiac with Ronnie Sox driving.
Oh wow.
Okay, so they went, and one of the things that I had found during 1960 was the Atlas Bucron tires worked really good for drag racing because they got bite even though they were spinning. So that's what we ran at the drag strip was Atlas Bucron tires.
Okay. I'm
And,
not familiar with those.
You kept them in the trunk and you went up to the drag strip and you changed tires and put the Bucrons on and ran. And with the help from Jack Strader telling me about things to do, I put a 430 gear in the '60 Pontiac. I mean,
Okay.
that's the car I drove every day and drove it when I went home to North Carolina. I drove it everywhere with a 430 gear in
It's a
it.
short
So-
gear to drive on the street.
yeah, but I don't remember it ever bothering me or feeling like the engine was turning too many RPM down the
Okay.
road.
I have that in 1965 that you actually went to the Winter Nationals. You were there basically just to watch, and is that what kind of gave you the kick back into racing again, or?
It kind of is, and I watched these guys.
What was that like actually? Like just to see the legends go all like.
Yeah, that was just really it's just of course I like drag racing anyway, but
Right.
then I was watching these guys that built headers, and I can't remember the name of the headers now, but they ran a '56 Pontiac and I-stock automatic,
Okay.
and I think they won stock eliminator, and that gave me the idea of building a '56 Pontiac for I-stock automatic.
And so in 1966, the next year is when you built that, or was that still 65?
No, that was 64, 65.
Okay,
That I
gotcha.
ran the '56 Pontiac
Gotcha.
in I-stock automatic.
And were you successful with that car?
Yeah, that was I was the Eastern Drag News top dog, and set the record in I-stock automatic for the Eastern Drag News thing. Yeah, it ran good. In probably the winter of '65, Bruce Larson's cousin, his name was Mike Adelman, and he lived in Wellsville, New York, and he told me that Costello wanted to sell the car.
The winningest Cobra in history was driven by Bruce Larson and Jim Costello, and it was a 1963 car, and it was called basically it was a dragon snake, but it really wasn't a dragon snake, right?
No, it just they Costello and Larson had converted it to a Dragon Snake, used for the Dragon Snake parts that they got from Shelby, as I understand it.
Do you know what those parts are, or what makes a Dragon Snake? Or
I actually do not. The one thing I think is a different rear spring, because that with the Dragon Snakes, you know, the camber with the car just sitting there is like this.
okay,
So that when you let the clutch out and it squats, you know, they straighten up. And I don't know what other parts made it a Dragon Snake. There might have been the front spring, might have been the front shocks. You know, the thing was, I never asked that question, what parts, what made it a Dragon Snake. And I actually didn't know it as a Dragon Snake.
oh, you didn't?
No, it was just a Cobra. It was just a race car.
Really?
Yeah.
And so at the time, were you aware that it was a national winning car?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Larson had won a lot of races with it. In fact, I think he had won enough that he aggravated Shelby's guys because they were running faster than Shelby's factory.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I believe that's correct. You know, Bruce Larson could probably either substantiate what I've said or maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure that Shelby's people kind of got aggravated with Bruce and Costello because they were running faster than their factory car was.
So when you bought this car, what condition did it come in? Was it purple still? Did it have the motor in it that Bruce had worked on and raced with? I mean,
Well, it was a complete race car. And
Complete race car,
Yeah,
okay.
right. I bought it just like they had raced it.
did you change the paint or
No.
anything like that? You just changed the letters down the side?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
okay, I wasn't sure. And then I read that you competed in 3 different classes with that car. Your goal was to basically try to win 3 different classes. Did you have 3 separate engines for that car, or was it just kind of like just the block that you had and all you had to do was change the intake and the heads? Or walk us through what that was like competing in 3 different classes with that Cobra.
You didn't change the engine because the short block stayed the same. You just changed the heads and the intake. And so I put it in C Sports, and I got the national record in C Sports. And then I converted it back to D Sports and ran at York. The record was a 90-something, 3, I think. And it's the car, I think it went a best 1161, which is like 3/10 under. And of course, you never bomb a record. I mean, you just don't do that, because you get just as many points for breaking it by 100th as you do by breaking it by 3/10. So I made a run and hit the brakes, and I missed it by 100th. And so I thought, okay, all right. So I'll take it to Indy in D Sports and run D Sports at Indy, which I did, and won class at Indy in D Sports.
Your '67 season was a pretty historical season for you.
Yeah, we won the NHRA World Points Championship. And
And that's what that trophy is over there, right?
that's correct. That's what that trophy is, right?
And can you explain what the World Points Championship is for the viewers at home, or to kind of walk us through that?
Okay. Well, it's funny because the World Finals were at Tulsa. And when I pulled into the parking lot out there at Tulsa the first day, Farmer did. I wasn't even aware of the World Points thing.
Okay,
I'd just been running.
you're just racing.
And I think I had won the NHRA Division I Street Eliminator Championship, okay? But we get out there and pull in the parking lot. Farmer Dismuke, who was the National Tech Director, was walking through the parking lot, and he came over and said, you know, you're tied with Chico Brashini from California for the World Points Championship. And so he said, well, you guys will have to run it off. So I did. He ran B Dragster.
Okay.
So we ran it off, and I beat him. And so I won the World Points Championship. And what that meant was that I had won more points in NHRA points racing than anybody else in the country.
Throughout the year.
Throughout the year in any class. In other words, no matter what class you're running, I had the most points, more than anybody else in any class. So I was the top NHRA points earner in 1967.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Jenkins competition? I know that there was some sort of like Moroso stall, like there was some sort of group that got together that opened up some sort of speed shop. Is that right?
Yes, and now I'm not sure what year it was. I know it definitely was 67.
67.
Might have been 66.
Oh, so you were a part of that group before 68.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, Jerry Stahl and Dick Moroso got together and decided to open a speed shop. And there were 5 charter stockholders. It was Dick Moroso, Jerry Stahl, Bill Jenkins, myself, and Jimmy Kerr.
Jimmy Kerr. And this was in York,
This
Pennsylvania.
is in York, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So through that, I had, of course, gotten to know Bill Jenkins. Going to when we have a meeting, corporation meeting, I got to know Bill Jenkins. So I knew Bill already before '68. But what actually happened was that I ended up selling the car, and then Jenkins at that point, at some point there, had decided to run 2 cars in '68, and Jerry Stahl got me, suggested to Bill that he look at me as driving for him in '68. And so I talked to Bill about it, and of course I wanted to do it, right? I mean, drive for Bill Jenkins.
I
yeah.
would, for
Right,
sure.
Right, that's right, yeah.
So he was already like a big name kind of.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Gotcha.
He in '67 he won.
Were you intimidated by him at all or anything?
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when I talked to Bill and we decided, okay, I wanted to do it, and he agreed. And I said to him, well, maybe we should go to a track and let's just see if I can drive the Camaro. And so we went to either a Quasco or a Capital, I forget which it was, and to meet a try out driving his '67 Camaro. Jenkins liked a T-handle.
The T-handle,
I
yeah.
didn't like that. I liked the knob.
Oh, okay.
So when he and I switched cars, we'd have to change
The knobs.
the knob, or just the two of us at a race. He might make some runs in this car and in that car, and I might do the same. So he liked the T-handle and I liked the knob.
Out of the Jenkins competition cars that you drove, Toy 3, Toy 4, Toy 5, did you drive all of them in competition for Jenkins, or did you just drive certain ones in competition?
No, I guess
Because I don't really think I've ever heard anybody say that you drove the '67 in like a national event or anything like that at all. So that's kind of what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I think I drove. Yeah, I definitely drove the '67. Well, in '68, the '67 car was the match race car.
Match race car, gotcha.
With the 427. And in
Okay.
fact, the '68 Camaro never ran as good in super stock as the '67 car did. So when we went to Indy in '68, Jenkins put the '67 car back in super stock trim.
Okay.
And so on Saturday, he had me go out and make a run on Saturday morning, and I went a 1096 or a 1098. And Chrysler, I say Chrysler, somebody, Chrysler, I don't know, a Chrysler factory, Chrysler guys, somebody, Chrysler, had the protest money at the Time Shack booth when I pulled around. And so the car went right from the Time Shack booth. I had to walk back to the pits. And so then Jenkins had to go tear the motor down. Of course, they were just, just aggravating grump. Yeah, I mean, because there wasn't anything wrong with the motor. Obviously, I didn't find
Right.
anything.
Do you remember anything special that was done to that '67 car that was kind of like something that like nobody was really supposed to know back then? Do you remember anything like that at all?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. There's lots of stories that have come out. The only thing that Jenkins did, and I didn't know it then, but it was also done to my car, the '69 car, was that he had a guy that could go in the front of the rear fender and move that fender well back tight to the inner fender.
Okay.
And that guy could do that. He could take a little slice out of that, and like with my '69 car, it had the chrome strips on it. And he could do all that and put that all back together, and you couldn't tell the difference. But that let us run a little bit bigger diameter tire in the wheel well, see, because that moved
Kind of like people would roll their lips today.
Yeah, but this guy just moved it back. They just
He would
was
move it
just-
back and make it look factory.
Oh, it's just factory. Yeah, factory. And I'm sure that was done
On the
to-
68
in
car?
the 68 car too. Yeah, at the time I didn't know it. Because that wasn't one of the things I needed to know.
Oh,
You know,
and
and
that's
I-
the
and I-
kind of that's the kind of thing that I've learned about Grumpy is that like if you didn't know if you didn't need to know, he wouldn't tell you.
Right. Yeah, and you just didn't. At least I didn't. I never questioned Grump. You know, if he said, "Go do this and do it this way" or whatever, you just did it.
That's okay.
You didn't say, "Well, why do you want to do that?" You just did it because you knew that he knew what he was doing. So,
Yeah.
and you point you made earlier, like, because I was certainly in awe of Jenkins, and as he was just a brilliant man. You know, he installed the two of them.
Well, he had an engineering degree also. Well, I guess he dropped out. But
I don't think he ever finished.
Yeah, he
right,
dropped it. Yeah, he
right.
dropped
I don't
out.
think he ever finished, but
Probably didn't need it.
he certainly had a practical engineering degree, or maybe even a PhD, practical PhD degree in engineering with all the stuff that he did and knew how to do, and was just an amazing person.
The 68 car. I've spoken with you on the phone before, and you were telling me that on the front of that car that you guys would mill off the bump stops on the subframe.
Right, that was done to all the cars.
That was done to all the cars.
right.
And can you explain to me a little bit about what that would do, or how that worked? Or
Okay, you know, you were so limited with tires then because of the wheel wells. You
Okay.
couldn't, a 10-inch tire was it. You couldn't put a bigger tire in there. So a real key to the whole thing was weight transfer,
Gotcha.
all right? So the higher you could get the front end to come up on launch, the more weight transfer you had. So Grump would cut that little bracket off where the rubber bumper hits, so that the front end could come up higher and the rubber bumper would go down against the subframe, but you'd get another inch or so
Yeah,
of
not
front
much,
end
but
travel.
yeah.
Okay, and then Stahl and Jenkins, they went to Coney and had Coney develop the downlock shocks. So
I didn't know that.
what you wanted was, as you launched the car, you wanted the front end to just be against the rubber bumpers at the peak in low gear.
Okay.
Okay, so the Coney downlock had no resistance going down, and you could adjust the resistance going up. So what you did was you adjusted the resistance in that shock of the rate at which the front end came up, and it would vary from track to track, or depending on what set of tires you were running or whatever. You adjust that again so that the front end would just be against the snubbers at the peak in low gear. If you hit the peak, if you hit the snubbers before the peak, then and then the front would come
bounce.
down and you'd lose weight transfer and lose traction in the back. But that was just part of the genius of Stahl and Jenkins.
I didn't know if like you guys all just kind of like sat at a table in the garage and kind of was like looking at the car and like, what do we do to kind of make it faster? If you were ever like kind of part of that, or if that's how it worked, or kind of like what the thought process was behind the modifications on his cars.
Well, there were never any roundtable discussions about
Gotcha.
what to do with the cars. Jenkins,
He just did it himself. or had
Jenkins
it done?
decided that stuff and told the rest of us what to do and how to do it.
Gotcha.
There was never a roundtable. Not that Jenkins, you know, if you made runs and stuff, Jenkins would certainly ask you about what you felt or what did or this or that to get input for him to decide what to do.
Okay.
He certainly got input from me and others about, so he would make a decision about what to do. Certainly that, but there was never roundtable discussions about what to do to the car.
Ed, take us back to 1968 at the World Finals.
They had scraped Tulsa, and it was slippery. We had the one set of tires, the AE compound from M&H Racemaster, but they fuzzed up, so you had to reverse them every run, and you only just chirped them going to the line. And I got to the final in Street Eliminator, and I had to run Fred Hurst in an A gasser, and the 67 Carnet Modified had the first set of closed open chamber heads. And when the heads got put together, somehow the valves were floating at like 7,000. So all day I'm shifting at 6. But it was live TV. And our normal procedure was every run, you put 5 gallons of you just poured 5 gallons of water, 2 5-gallon cans of water through the engine to cool it off.
Okay.
We only had a chance. And of course, in the Jenkins camp, there's 3 cars in the final, right? So you got everybody trying to get ready. So plus they're hollering at us to come back in the staging lanes, and only had a chance to get 1 can of water through the motor. So in the staging lanes, getting ready to pull back, the motor's already at 140, which Jenkins wanted the motor like at 140 as you go to the line. So, I'm concerned about that because it was live TV, so they're hollering at us, Marty Barrett, I'll never forget that, hollering at us to get back in the lanes. And so when I pull in there to run Fred Hurst, he has to come, we're over here in the staging lane, here's the track, here's these staging lanes, and he comes from down here because he's a gasser. So I pull up in there and I'm ready, I pull up in and stage and stuff, and Fred Hurst pulls in there, and of course I've chirped the tires a couple of times, but the motor's already too warm, right? Warmer
Not
than
ideal.
Not hot, but
Yeah.
warmer than ideal. And so Fred Hurst pulls in there and lights the stage light, and then backs out, and that should have been race over because you're not supposed to be able to do that. So anyway, he pulls in there, and we go to leave, and when I let the clutch out, the tire turned once before it hooked, and so he caught me. He just by inches he caught me and beat me. So I ended up runner-up street eliminator. But I've often thought about that, and you just cringe at the idea that had the tire not slipped, I think I would have won because I ran it right to 7,000 through the gears.
You were right there.
I was right, going as fast as I could go, as fast as the car would go.
Talk to me about Grumpy driving his Nova against the old reliable Z28. You would have been obviously a spectator in that event, but he ended up losing that, and you were telling me that the reason that he lost is because I guess one of the leaf springs slipped out of a shackle or something like that, or?
No, there's as I recall it, the center pin, there's a center pin that goes through the spring.
Yep.
Okay, and then that fits into the bracket welded to the rear end. Mm-hmm. And that's what locates the thing.
Keeps them kind of together.
And we were running the Lakewood traction bars, which had a J bolt,
okay, right,
to hook holds everything together. And somehow that got loose enough that the rear, as I recall, the rear end, the center pin jumped out of there and let the one wheel get into the fender. And in my mind, I was thinking that's why.
Just slowed him down just a little bit.
Slowed him down just a little bit enough to let Strickler. He didn't catch Strickler because Strickler, of course, got the head start. But Strickler's a good driver, and so was Jenkins. So I mean, it would have been a good race, no matter a tight race, no matter how you looked at it.
What was that like after that race with you guys all being part of Jenkins's kind of Grumps group, and just kind of walk me through what it was like. Do you celebrate that win for Dave just by himself, or do you celebrate as a team, or what?
Well, it's funny, but I actually have no recollection of what went on afterwards. Whether
partied a little too hard, huh?
No, not party because I didn't drink.
Gotcha. Okay.
Dave was kind of a party guy, and so was Grump too, a little bit a party guy. But I just say that not in criticism, but sure. they did like to party. I sort of never did that because I didn't drink and whatever. But
fair enough.
And we had a plane to catch to go home because I flew out. See, Dave brought the cars out on that 4-car carrier that he had restored. So I had a plane to catch. My wife and I had a plane to catch to get home. I just have no recollection of what we all did after the race. They obviously went to some kind of a dinner NHRA thing where Strickler was awarded a world championship and stuff. So, but I don't think I went, and I don't remember why. I just have no recollection of what I did after the race.
Well, that's okay. I just wasn't sure, like, even if when you got back to Pennsylvania and everyone got back there, like, oh, for the next, in the off season, what was everyone pretty happy with the results, or?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so. At some point there in the fall, Jenkins told me he didn't want to run 2 cars
For 69.
for 69.
Right.
But everyone was pretty. But you know, Strickler lived in New York. Of course, Jenkins was down in Malvern. But I lived in Wellsville, New York. That's like 200, 300
Right, yeah,
miles
it's
away,
pretty far.
6 hours away. So, plus having to work every day.
Okay.
So I don't know if they had any, but I'm sure Jenkins was pretty happy. I mean, he had 3 cars to go to the finals, and that's something.
Oh, that's a big
Out of
deal.
all those cars that
Oh,
went
yeah.
to the World Finals, and 3 of Jenkins' cars went to the finals.
Yeah, it's just a testament to the knowledge and the skill that you were able to kind of be around. And
Absolutely.
was he a pretty mean guy? I mean, his nickname is Grumpy. I mean, just do you have a favorite memory that you, like, you could think back on that you'd like to share with the audience about Bill, or?
Well, I think, I don't know for sure, but I think maybe the reason he got the name of Grumpy, I don't know exactly why, but he wasn't a chit-chat guy.
Right.
You know, he didn't.
Just business.
Mostly just business. He was great to me. He never said a cross word to me the whole time I was associated with him.
Okay.
He treated me. You couldn't ask anybody to treat you any better. You know, I mean, he was a good guy, but he was not a chit chat guy. And I know one thing. I used to laugh at some of the guys that Jenkins did a motor for or whatever. Would come ask him something, and he'd give them something to do, and they'd go away and then come back with another question, but they wouldn't have done what he said to do the first time. And he was pretty short with them if you did that. If you asked him for help and he gave you
The advice, or?
advice to do and you didn't do it and then came back again without having done what he advised you to do, he didn't have a lot of patience with that. And it was just kind of funny sometimes to see the guys do that, because you'd know when they came back, if they hadn't done what he suggested, that he was not going to be happy with them.
I also have on here that the cross members for his cars were cut and the oil pans were modified. Is that something that you remember?
No, the front cross member, Jenkins, you know, in the Camaro,
Okay.
you couldn't get the oil pan off.
Sure, yeah.
Right, with
Yeah,
the
the way
motor
they're
in the
set up in
car,
the subframe,
right.
and yeah.
So Jenkins would notch the front cross member and cut that piece out and then put it back in and weld it so that you could get the oil pan off with the motor in the car.
Was that allowed, or we just didn't say anything about that back then? Fair enough.
I don't think it was advertised.
Fair enough.
And Jenkins, you know, one of the things we did underneath the cars was painted everything flat black,
Everything black.
except the gas tank, which was white.
Why is that?
Why do you think? Heat transfer. You're sitting out there on hot asphalt.
You know
and
what?
the
You are.
The heat radiating into the gas tank. So
The heat
you
coming
can-
off of the track.
Right. the
Yeah,
gas-
I was thinking for a different reason, but I know he painted some of his earlier cars his engines black because of the heat transfer.
Yeah, well,
that-
trying to get rid of the heat.
get
right.
rid of
But
the heat. Yeah, not keep
underneath
the heat away.
the cars,
Yeah.
underneath the cars flat
It's
black
bouncing. Makes total
was
sense.
just so things didn't show up,
Man,
which
was a
may be like the
genius.
cross member. And, you know, like the fender modifications that we did, but everything was just painted flat black. And the transmission's painted flat black, so
Oh, I didn't know
you
that.
might not be able to see the difference between a Borg Warner and a Muncie and a Borg Warner.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, because maybe every once in a while we might have had a Borg Warner with the 236 Ford low gear in it in the Camaro, where it's supposed to have had a Muncie in it. But Might have.
Might have. Hold on one second here. So you had mentioned that Jenkins wasn't going to run 2 cars in '69, and this is kind of like the path that kind of led you to the Yenko yellow car that you had. Is that how that worked, or?
Yeah, when he decided he didn't want to run 2 cars in '69, I didn't know what I was going to do. So at one point I thought, well, okay, I'll run a Z28. So I actually called Strickler, and Strickler took a Z28 down to Jenkins for me. And then it was all happening at the same time. Stahl, I think, was talking to Yenko and maybe Jenkins, and came up with the idea of me running one of the Yenko Copo cars. So we got that deal put together, and Strick went down and picked up the Z28 and took it back to York. You know, just a good guy. Yeah, Strickler's a good guy, and just did that for me, with me up in Wellsville, New York, and him in York and Malvern. And so then got the thing put together with Yenko, and I called Yenko and got, his agreement, and so.
So Jerry Stahl was the guy that made the connection between you and Don.
Yeah, right. Jerry Stahl was, yeah. And Dick Williams was involved, was a friend of Stahl and also a friend of Yenko. So I'm not sure exactly how it all got to put together and who said what and what, but between the 2 of those and Yenko and myself, and mainly them, they got the deal put together with Yenko, and then I got the benefit of it with getting a car.
I personally think that the Yenko that you raced is probably one of the most, I would call it like a holy grail kind of Camaro. I know that hurts because the car it's still missing. It hasn't been found or anything like that. But can you walk us through just kind of like meeting Don Yenko and how you were able to acquire this car? I think that you told me one time it was like wrecked or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The particular car that he gave me had I believe it was the left rear quarter panel dented in, because that car had been used to tow another one to Harrisburg.
Oh, okay.
Like probably Yenko sold a couple of cars to the dealer, but anyway, they jackknifed on the way or something in the rain or something. And so I always thought that was why he gave me that car, was because the rear quarter panel dented. Not wasn't bad, just a little bit.
Is that the
then he
same,
didn't have to fix it, so I had to fix it.
Is that the same? There's a couple of photos of that car. Is that the same dent, or did you ever fix it?
Oh no! I fixed that right away.
Gotcha.
You're seeing the dent over on the right side, and that happened at the Gator Nationals.
Oh, okay.
In '70, that dent over there in the rear quarter, that little dent, because I was like cleaning the tires at Gainesville, and when it was my turn to run, and one of the Chrysler guys had pulled in there behind me, where anyways. So I'm backing up trying to get more hits on the tires, and I didn't even know he was back there. I didn't know he'd pulled around
Gotcha.
In line with the track, and so I backed into him, and it dented his grill and dented my rear fender a little bit.
What was Don Yank? What was that like, meeting Don?
That was good. He was a nice guy. I never, of course, never really got to know him that well because I didn't have that much interaction with him. The one time we did have we had a super stock circuit race over at Altoona, Pennsylvania, and he was friends with the fellow that owned it or ran the track, and flew his plane over and landed on the track at Altoona, and was there with us while we were racing, and said, well, would they let me take you for a ride? Would they let me take him for a ride? And I said, well, I don't know if they would or not. Let's ask them. And as I said, he was friends with the owner or manager, whatever, and they said I could take him for a ride. So I did. He got a helmet, and there was obviously a seat belt there, because back then we just wore the standard Chevrolet seat belts.
Yeah.
Right. So I get up there and hit the tires 2 or 3 times going to the line, and 7,000, and drop the hammer and drop the clutch, and off we go. And some months later, he did an interview with Car and Driver, and they were asking him about that he had sponsored a drag race car, and he said, yeah. And then he was saying, yeah, and he said, I went for a ride in the car with Hedrick and said, gosh, said they just don't shift gears and stuff. Said they attack the gear shift lever. And he said, the thing, and he actually hurt my neck, when I launched the car.
Threw him back.
I threw him back, yeah. But
Interesting.
And because he was a professional road race car driver.
Yeah. An accomplished, national level winning multiple time Corvette driver.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so I didn't think, well, watch out.
You'd have to tell him.
Right. But that was funny. And also then he wanted to make a pass in the car.
Really?
And I was pretty nervous about that because, the transmission was slick shifted. So you can't just easy shift them. You have to bang the gears really hard. But he did, and it was okay. He didn't hurt the transmission. He made hurt. I don't remember how fast he went. I don't remember what kind of time he turned.
And that was in that yellow car?
It was in that yellow car, yeah. He made a pass at Altoona, Pennsylvania. So that was probably the closest I got to know him. But he was a nice guy.
I heard he was an all-around pretty good stand-up guy.
He was. And he was right at Sebring. He was down at Sebring, right, road racing. And I was down at Avon Park, Florida, putting in a jet gas turbine for Florida Power Corp.
Okay.
And he got me the credentials and stuff to come over to Sebring and be with him at the road race for them running. They were running actually a ZL1 Camaro there.
Did he win?
I don't remember now. I just remember all the Chevrolet guys there because they were having some kind of trouble with something. I don't know whether if it was oil flow or having some kind of problem with the car. And so he'd make a run and they'd come back and they were all clustered over the car. And of course, I couldn't get that close to see what they were doing because you don't want to be in the way. But he got me the credentials and stuff to be there and be with him while he was running the car. I guess I couldn't stay for the race because I had to go back to work. But and Yenko also loaned me a station wagon to tow with.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, that was a tow vehicle you told me that you were furnished by him. Right,
for the 69 year, for that year, he gave me a
You had to give that back?
Yeah, I had to give that back. That was his. Yeah, that wasn't mine. That was his. I had to give it back, yeah.
So run us through like what your year was like in 1969 with your Yenko Camaro. I mean, obviously, we have a Gator Nationals Wally here. That was in '70 and with the automatic transmission. Is that right?
Right.
So, in '69, were you successful with that car, or walk us through like your first year with it, or?
Yeah, we had a good year. We won the NHRA Division I Superstock Championship in '69, and. Chevrolet won the Manufacturers Championship, and we were the top Chevrolet points earner in the country.
And so for someone at home that's not familiar with that, you basically won enough races over that year for Chevrolet to win the Manufacturers Cup. Is that kind of how that worked?
Right. And also I won more points and contributed to that more than any other Chevrolet racer in the country. Right.
I didn't know
I was
that.
the top Chevrolet points earner in '69 for Chevrolet to win the Manufacturers Championship.
In the Yenko Camaro.
In the Yenko Camaro. And I was on the cover of National Dragster, and I believe that Chevrolet sent a copy of that National Dragster to all the Chevrolet dealers, because the way I found out about it was the local dealer in Wellsville, New York called me and said, "Hey, we've got this paper and your car's on the front page."
That's so cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah,
that is just the coolest thing.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
So in '69, you're like on the cover. Oh man, that is just, that's amazing, Ed. I think that's awesome. What happened? Was this in between '69 and '70 when you switched to the automatic transmission? Because basically, you won the Wally, and a Wally is. Can you explain that to someone that's not familiar with what a Wally is? That's for winning a national event.
That's for winning a national event, right?
And it's from what I've read, the automatic transmission that was put in the Yenko Camaro that you had came from toy 6, which was Grumpy's '69 Camaro that he was running, but he didn't have really much success with it or something like that, so he decided to put it in your car. Or walk us through that, or how did that come about?
Well, in the summer, at some point during the summer of '69, Jenkins had built a ZL1 motor and put the automatic in there.
Okay.
And that was the car that the one night Jenkins wanted to work on the carburetor on my car, and we wanted to work on the suspension of his car. So he had me inside the garage down at Malvern, and we put rosin on the floor and burned the rosin in, and then I'm doing, low gear, full throttle shots across the shop while he's watching the suspension, and then make changes in the suspension. And then he was working on my carburetor, and he ended up like carving out a float and putting it in the rear upper corner of the rear float bowl to stop the gas, because he was saying that he was looking like my car was like laying down in low gear, like like it was leaning out as on the launch because of the gas running up, even with the jet extensions, was running up the black float bowl. So that's what he was doing. Then he'd tell me what changes to make in the Lakewood bars or the front shocks or whatever, and then I'm making a launch across the shop. And I was really nervous because we were launching right across the two-post lift, and the front post of the two-post lift sticks above the floor about that far, and I'm like, practically sliding right across it, on the brakes, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to catch the front cross member on that thing, and it's going to tear something up, and Jenkins, he'll have my hide. So I was pretty nervous about that, making those full throttle shots across the shop floor.
I would be, trying to test in tune as he's kind of standing there just staring at you.
Right, yeah, watching. Yeah, that was quite an experience. But anyway, never could get it to work. Never could get that combination to work, because nobody at that point, and I believe I'm correct in saying that, nobody had built a 9-inch converter for GM stuff. And then along in the fall and maybe the winter, at some point, Vitar, Vinnie Tarantola Vitar, had built a 9-inch converter, and Jenkins came up with the idea of putting that together in the Yenko, in my car. And so he sent the transmission that he had to Vitar, had them go through it, and they sent it back and sent a converter. And then my car was actually up at Jerry Stahl's, where he built the first set of 427 Camaro headers on my car.
Really?
And so Jerry Mayo, my
First
mom,
ever or first stall headers?
first stall headers.
First stall headers.
First stall headers.
Okay.
And so Jerry Mayo, my longtime crew chief that went everywhere with me, couldn't go to the Gainesville, and so Ted Hartman that lived in Salamanca, Hartman Chevrolet, was a Chevrolet dealer. Ted Hartman went with me. So Ted and I went down to Stahl's and picked the car up and took it to Jenkins and took the 4-speed out and put the automatic in, and took the proportioning valve out of the rear brakes so you could get full pressure on the rear brakes. And then with the Lakewood bars, back then, the Lakewood bar actually extended behind the rear end, and there's what we called a reaction clamp back there.
Okay.
So with a 4-speed, you had to adjust that reaction clamp back there so you didn't get too much reaction out of the Lakewood bars. So we took that off for the automatic so we'd get full reaction. So the whole car would just, and it did, full car would just raise up. And then Jenkins had me change the timing on the car from a total of 40 to 42, and that was the only changes we made in the car, and yet the thing just absolutely flew. I mean, it just, I don't know, you want to get into the Gator Nationals? Or
Sure. I have on here that you ran a 1070 or something with that car. Is that, or a 1071?
No, with the 4-speed, the best the car ever ran was a 1071, 131.
With 4-speed, gotcha.
With
Okay.
4-speed. So we get down to Gainesville, and of course we hadn't run the car with automatic. And another funny thing was, when we put the automatic in at Jenkins, and headed up on the lift, and so I'm in the car, and Ted, and so then we tried running through the gears just to be sure everything's working, and it wouldn't shift. And I thought, oh no, something's wrong. So we called Vinny, Vinny Tarantino, and said, the thing's not shifting. And he said, well, did you put the brake on? I said, no. He said, well, you got to put the brakes on, put some load on it, because he said, well, that converter is loose enough that when you shift it, if you don't have any load on it, you won't even hear it. And so we did that, put some brake on, and it worked. It worked fine. It was just we weren't used to it. So anyway, we get down to Gainesville on Friday. The record was 11:43, and some other the car ran Super E with a 4-speed, but it ran Super D automatic with the automatic.
Okay.
The weight changed the weight. Okay, so it ran Super D automatic. Some other D automatic cars had run and had gone 11:28. So I made a run and just hit the brakes and went 11:28. Just luck, not. You can't say that I did that.
Basically, the record without trying.
I just
Or close, or
I ran the 11:28 because then that was going to be the dial-in for the eliminator.
oh,
That's,
okay.
Won't be the record anymore. You're going to be dialed in
Dialed
at
in,
that
gotcha,
11:28.
gotcha. And that's the time you have to beat.
That's
Or
right.
get
That's
closest
where
to
you
it.
get dialed in at 11:28.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the headers that Stahl built were adjustable primaries. So the rest of Friday and Saturday, where the air was real good, I just bumped through the ET lights and then made a full pass. And based on the mile per hour, changed the length of the primaries until I got best mile per hour. Well, come Sunday, the air went away. And guys that had like high 20s and 30s, they're now going 40s, 50s, I don't know, a lot slower. And so I won, I guess, the first couple of rounds, whatever. And then in the quarterfinals, I had to run another Camaro and Super D automatic. Well, if you ran a car in the same class, there was no breakout.
Okay.
Back then there was a 10th breakout. In other words, you were dialed in at
Go over.
11:28, and you couldn't go quicker than 11:18.
Got you.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but if you ran a car in the same class, there was no breakout. And when I got down there, I could hold the car to 4,300 without the rear tires turning. And that's like Friday and Saturday, that worked okay. Well, Sunday, we were running quicker. And so I pulled in to run that Camaro and built it up to 4,300. The rear tire started turning, the car started coming, the rear started moving. So I knew, wow, I can't go on the last caution like I've been doing, so I had to wait till it was on. And of course, the other guy's gone, right? He's out there, I don't know, car length or two, whatever, but there's no breakout. So I made a full pass, went 11:04.
Oh, wow.
11:04, and I don't even know what he went, but something way slower because I caught him and beat him. And I haven't really
That must have felt really good to leave late and
it
beat
did.
him in the end like
Absolutely,
that.
I did. Yeah, and I've got a picture of somewhere. I've got a picture of our two cars going across the finish line with me ahead. But anyway, pull around to the time shack, and he's out of his car and running over and is yelling at me, "Oh, you broke out! You broke out!" And I just said to him, "Hey, there's no breakout, same class, and I don't have time to talk with you. I got to get back and get the pits." So I got back and we got the car cooled off, and then I had to run Gene Tedder in the Chrysler Street Hemi car in Super E automatic. I was a Super D automatic, and I think he was dialed at 11:43 or something. Anyway, I'm dialed at 11:28. And so then on my chirps going to the line, I could hold it to 4,000 without the rear tires turning. So I built it up. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a run. Then the semifinals against Sox.
Oh.
That's what it was. Then I beat the Camaro. In the semifinals, I had to run Sox in the 68 Super B car in Super Stock. And then he was running Super Stock and Pro Stock.
Gotcha.
And so I built it to 4,000, and I leave. And somewhere like in second gear, top of second gear or something, Sox goes by me. And I'm thinking, I was late, Mm-hmm. So I stayed in it, I went 11:07. Sox red lighted.
Oh.
Sox red lighted.
That's why he was out front.
That's why he beat me, yeah. So, and then in the finals at Pro Stock, he was late against Grump, and Grump beat him. That's Grump won Pro Stock at the Gator Nationals. Okay.
Okay.
But to get back to my story, then we get back in the pits and get to run Gene Tedder And, you know, I launched it at 4,000 and he left, but I'm like on him in low gear and then just rode the brake, put a fender in front of him and rode the brake all the way down and went 1128 right on the dial in and won.
So
and
it
that
was
was, of course, that
pretty
was the
easy.
new record for Super D automatic too, was 1128. That was the other thing. In the final, there's no breakout.
Gotcha.
That
Okay.
was NHRA's way of, in a good way, of trying to keep the records honest, you know. But of course, I never ran the car in automatic, you know. But I'm sure that like Friday or Saturday, if I had made full passes, I know the car would have gone 1090s, and it probably would have gone 1080s with the automatic in it. I just, you know, I'm sure of that. I didn't do it, but I'm just sure of it. It went 1104 in bad air. And so I know it would have picked up a tenth, maybe a tenth and a half, maybe 2/10. But we came back home and took the automatic out and put the 4-speed in it. And you know, I wasn't smart enough to realize what a competitive car it would have been with the automatic in it in '70, and so ended up selling it because the record had kind of been ruined by the AMXs. You know, they kept breaking the record, got it down to, I believe, a 1093 or something like that.
And that's the factory-backed AMXs.
Factory-backed
They
AMXs.
ran Superstock
They
Eliminator.
ran Superstock E. They ran Superstock E, same as the Camaro. But same day, same track, you know, I had them covered by tenth and a half. They couldn't outrun me, you know, same day, same track. But they had that record broken down to the point that bad track, bad air, I couldn't run 1093. I'd be going like 11.0s. So just, you know, I figured, well, I just need to get rid of the car. And not thinking that, you know, I should have kept it with the automatic in it and run it in Super D automatic for 1970. But
Well, you say that, Ed, but the thing is you made a name for yourself working a 4-speed up until that point, you know? So I understand your thought process completely. It's just the automatic, and you're with Grumpy, and you're like, you know, who wants to drive an automatic car, you know? But it would have been a very competitive car, like you said.
yeah, well, I'm glad you understand it
I
because
totally-
I don't, yeah. But that, you know, put the 4-speed in it and advertise
It's
it.
kind of like bragging rights, you know, that you're
Maybe.
a 4-speed guy.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be the automatic guy.
Back in the day, I think us 4-speed guys kind of looked down our noses a little bit. Maybe that's probably not a good thing to say. But anyway,
It's probably true.
sort of at the automatic guys, you know. But anyway,
How much did you sell that car for?
7,500.
$7,500. Was that a good price for a used Camaro back then? Or?
I don't know. You know, thinking back on it, if maybe, you know, I think Jenkins sold like the Nova Chevy, the '68 Nova. I think for $3,000 or $4,000.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. There's ads where he had it advertised, but so maybe it was a good price. You know, you thinking back on it, maybe it was worth quite a bit more than that. It was really a competitive race car, and it was a Jenkins car.
Right.
And because the whole car was Jenkins, you know, not me. I mean, it was my car, but
He set everything up,
everything was
or-
set up to the way Jenkins ran the cars. That's the whole thing was Jenkins, the way Jenkins was set up, all of it.
So, like, you would take your car to his shop? Is that kind of what would happen?
The car
or
in
how-
in '69, well, my car it stayed at Jenkins' shop.
Oh, it stayed there.
A lot of most of the time it was at Jenkins' shop. Sometimes I took it home to
Gotcha.
Wellsville, but most of the time it stayed at Jenkins' shop, and then I would go down there and we'd go to the races.
And you would just show up and then just race it is kind of how it would
Right.
work? Or
Right, and sometimes Jenkins would do stuff to the car. I know he, one time, he wanted to try a different hood, and so he had a new hood and had it painted stripe, and I had to get the stripes from Yenko and put on there. That's how I know how the gals did it, because I called them up and they told me how to do it with soapy water. You put them on there with soapy water, and you can just slide them around and position them just exactly where you want them, work the bubbles out, and the soapy water dries. And
that's something that I have never read online, and that you've taught me is the girls put the stripes on Yenkos.
There may have been boys too, but I think mostly it was girls, women, in Yenko shop that did most of the striping of the cars.
If you guys have any comments or anything like that, please feel free to ask questions below. Ed, I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
So you're very welcome.
Catch you around.